A new order paper response shows that many of Canada's federal government agencies have failed to do any sort of risk assessment of Huawei technology, including federal agencies directly involved in broadband internet procurement. It's just the high-tech spy arm of the Chinese state masquerading as a cell phone company. What could possibly go wrong? Justin Trudeau refuses to stand up to communist spy telecom giant Huawei. Trudeau's government refuses to make a firm decision on whether to allow Huawei 5G technology on Canadian networks, even though the other allies in the intelligence-sharing Five Eyes group, the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand, have all taken steps to ban Huawei from their networks. And they've done this with good reason. The Wall Street Journal reports U.S. officials say Huawei Technologies Corporation can covertly access mobile phone networks around the world through, quote, backdoors designed for use by law enforcement, as Washington tries to persuade allies to exclude the Chinese company from their networks. Intelligence shows Huawei has had this secret capability for more than a decade. Now, Trudeau's failure to protect us from Chinese spying here is no surprise. This is from Global News from a little over a week ago. Trudeau votes against Conservatives' motion on Huawei's involvement in Canada's 5G network. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau voted Wednesday against a Conservative motion that calls on the Liberal minority government to announce its decision on the involvement of Chinese technology company Huawei's role in Canada's 5G network within 30 days and, quote, stop Chinese state harassment and interference in Canada. The motion passed with 179 to 146 votes.
All those opposed to the motion and participating in person will please rise.
Monsieur Trudeau.
Monsieur Trudeau.
Mr. Blair.
Mr. Blair.
Monsieur Rodriguez.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Monsieur Lametti.
Monsieur Lametti.
Monsieur Champagne.
Mr. Champagne.
Ms. McKenna.
But here's the thing. Trudeau standing up to vote down that motion was totally expected because the government has not taken Huawei seriously at all. In fact, we now know most departments say they haven't done any risk assessment of Huawei technology, including sensitive departments and departments involved in procurement, like Public Services and Procurement Canada or the Treasury Board, or departments involved in financing broadband, such as Infrastructure and Rural Economic Development Canada. It's all here in this order paper response to a question asked by Conservative MP Mark Dalton from Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge. Now, Dalton asked, with regard to the Canadian government's reaction to the report from the United Kingdom's National Cybersecurity Centre and Huawei Cybersecurity Evaluation Centre, which indicated that Huawei 5G technology could put national security at risk. Has any other government department or agency conducted a risk assessment in relation to Huawei? And if so, what are the details, including the scope of the assessment and the results? Now, let's get right into this. On page 4 of the order paper response, we find out that the Privy Council office, Trudeau's own department, says conducting a risk assessment in relation to Huawei is simply outside the scope of the Privy Council's mandate. Yeah, we wouldn't want the Chinese spying on Trudeau's department. On page 26, Global Affairs says the same thing. The risk assessment is completely outside of their mandate. On page 40, Industry and Innovation never actually says if they've done any sort of risk assessment or not. They just talk about a generalized review that's currently being done by the government with regard to Huawei. On page 58, we can see that Public Service and Procurement Canada, that's the buy and sell agency, they've not conducted any risk assessment with regard to Huawei. On page 62, The Treasury Board has also not conducted a risk assessment in relation to Huawei. On page 38, we see that Rural Economic Development, as part of Infrastructure Canada, has not conducted a risk assessment in relation to Huawei. And that's the agency responsible for broadband expansion into rural Canada. On page 55, look at this from the RCMP. The RCMP has not undertaken or been engaged in any risk assessment related to Huawei 5G technology. The Liberals are not taking the threat of China seriously. They aren't even bothering to take it seriously. When is Justin Trudeau going to stand up for the safety of Canadians and Chinese dissidents and block this communist spy company pretending to be a cell phone company from Canadian networks? For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig are two Canadians that have been kidnapped by the Chinese Communist state. They're being held hostage. They're political prisoners. But we are doing what we can to raise their profile, and we have hired a lawyer to take their fight all the way to the United Nations to help fund our legal battle, to read our legal documents and see the full complaint. Please go to freethetwomichaels.com.